undergrad, minors in wellness and public health as a concentration. So I'm glad to be here. Thank you for having me. It's really great that we're here to ask important questions to our panelists about enabling teenagers and youth to access health information, to pursue healthcare personally and privately without guardian support or with guardian support. We're going to find out. There are varying experiences in youth's lives that will affect how they answer the following questions. I will ask about 10 questions provided there is time, and as Ms. Bloom said, we're going to have a Q&A at the end. There is no wrong question, but if the panelists feel like they need to pass, they can pass. You just say, I'm going to pass. This is a safe space for all involved, staff members, audience members, and panelists. We're going to have a good time by discussing the answers. So let's keep an open ear and attentive ear to our volunteers today. But with that being said, do you have any questions? We can get started. Perfect. All right. So we can skip around. You can go right down the line, however you'd like to start. In general, how much independence do you think teenagers should have? What decisions should teenagers make? What decisions should they not make? There's a few things working with this question. Do you think that teenagers need to prove themselves worthy of independence? So.
All right, well, I'll start since
Thank
I'm
you,
at the
Ed.
front of the line here. My name is Ed Boughton. I have 3 boys in the New Haven school system. I'm a small business owner, and I have a 10-year-old, 13-year-old, 16-year-old. And to address the question, I think that teenagers need to be involved in every aspect of all the decision processes that they have. It's your decisions. I would say that the shorter term the decision, the less influence maybe a parent or a guardian might have. On a longer term decision, anything that's going to guide your life in the long run down the road is something that you want to make sure you have a parent involved with. I don't want I don't want to necessarily control every decision of every minute of your day. But if we're talking something that's going to affect your life in the long run, I want to be involved.
Hi, my name is Natalie. I am a mother and also a social worker, so I kind of come from 2 sort of places in some of these questions. I have 3 children that I've raised. I have a 24-year-old, I have a 15-year-old, and I have a 13-year-old, one of whom goes to school. I actually take the position that as a parent, I'm my children's first teacher, and it's my responsibility to train them up in the way that they should grow, and then when they have good values, they're not going to depart from that when they get older. I think it's a biblical principle. I think it's a life principle. And so I think when one of your roles when you teach someone is that in order to figure out whether or not they've learned their lesson is to help give them the opportunity to make some decisions. And when they make those decisions, you kind of see where the direction is and the seeds that you planted around values and principles. And I think that's important. But I also think that it's about guiding those decisions for my teenagers, because nothing that you do when you're under the age of 18 is your very own responsibility, and your parents always kind of have to be responsible for the things that you do. So I think that it's not something you do all by yourself, but I think that you have a right and a responsibility to, learn lessons and make some responsible judgments in your life.
Well, as a teen, I think that we should have independence, but to a certain extent, because some teenagers, they don't know right from wrong, or they think what's wrong is right. I think we should have to prove ourselves worthy, because a lot of times if you give teens too much independence, they'll do what they want. And if they don't have stability, it won't end well.
Hi. As me being a teen, I think that the decisions that the teenagers should make is the ones that they feel that they can handle on their own. Parents are here to guide us in the right direction, but also we're here to make our own decision on what we want to do, how do we want to act, and although they have the overall say, it's still us to decide whether we want to make this decision or not.
And my name's Erin, and I feel like I'm sort of wearing 2 hats today. I'm an educator and trainer from Planned Parenthood, so I can help with some of the health questions. I also am a parent myself. I have 2 small children at home. And when I think about independence with teenagers, and I work with teenagers every day, as I think about how old they are. So a younger teenager is going to need a lot more support from their parents and family and other adults like teachers and social workers in their life. Well, thank you. And an older teenager, I hope, has a relationship with their family that they can have a little bit more independence and maybe go out and try something, and if there's a consequence, then they can go back home and talk to their family about it. So I think about how old they are and what experiences that they have.
Thank you so much. Can you introduce themselves? Ed, Natalie, Nyaja, and Aaron, thank you. I'm going to write their names on the board behind them so you can remember while I ask them their second question they're answering. Right? There's an abundance of issues that teenagers deal with daily and over the course of their lives. What issue do you think affects teenagers the most? And please explain your reason for suggesting that.
I have to say that from a parent's perspective, I think that one of the most troubling things that I see is that you guys have to deal with is pressure, outside pressure from peers and pop culture and things like that. As a parent, I find that sometimes it's difficult to have my kids at home and I'm trying to instruct them in things like respect and paying attention and maybe how to make good decisions in their lives. And then once the child goes out into his friends, school, the rest of the world, their social environment, now it's all about what we want to wear, what we want to watch, what we want to listen to, what we can get away with. And that's just a culmination of pop culture and societal pressure. And I think that pressure is the most difficult thing that teens have to deal with.
I think I would agree with that. I think that the decisions that you guys make, both about relationships, friends and peers, and healthy relationships and healthy boundaries, and also education, because I think that both of those things impact your life on a much longer term than you realize. That the decisions that you make today about who you spend your time with and how they influence you and how invested you are and what you learn and how important that is are decisions that you don't realize in the moment mean so much more later on.
Out of all the issues, I would say, because I'm going to say vaguely, because teens deal with a lot. Stress, education, friends, drama. I would say the most is really education, because a lot of teens, they don't want to do what they're told. They don't want to go to class. They don't want to do their work. And then when they get their report cards, they're looking. It's hard to stay, a lot of times it's hard to stay focused. Me personally, I say, it's hard to stay focused when what you're learning about isn't interesting. So, I think more of us being focused.
I feel like there's no pinpoint of an issue that affects teens the most, because like Ed said, like there's a lot of peer pressure going on, so it depends on who you're hanging out with and what kind of activities they're doing in their life. Like a lot of teens are getting involved in sex, drugs, they're becoming pregnant, and there's no specific issue that affects teenagers the most, because they all do. So.
Yeah, I would agree with what everybody's said so far. I know when I go into a class to teach about relationships or about sexual health and reproduction, the big thing people want to talk about is relationships and friendships and trust and love, and how do I have a healthy relationship? How do I communicate with my partner? And I think that ties into peer pressure a whole lot. And I think kind of like Nyaja was saying, just the general pressure to do well in school and feel stressed, and bodies are changing and growing, and you're trying to figure all that stuff out. I think that's a big pressure that people don't talk about a lot.
Third question, do you believe that teenagers are being efficiently educated, we just touched upon this actually, on sex, pregnancy, and drugs? Why or why not? If not, how do you think teenagers can become more educated?
Well, ultimately, I think that This is always a fun one to talk because sometimes people come down on two very different sides of the whole sex education type of thing. I think the school, I gotta give you guys a lot of credit and educators a lot of credit as well, because it's a difficult subject to deal with. Sometimes parents clam up and don't have the ability to articulate themselves as well as educators and people that do this with young teenagers every day. So sometimes it could be a little challenging for us, but on the same hand, it's something that I look forward to discussing with the kids because it fosters a relationship with my kids and me. And anything that fosters a better relationship between my kids and me is better for everybody. That said, like I said, I give the schools and you guys a lot of credit for what you learn here.
I guess I'm going to go back to my main point. I'm probably going to say it over and over again, but I always see myself as my children's first teacher. And I think the most important thing for any teenager is to have an open and honest relationship with their parents. And for me as a parent to teach my children that they can talk to me about anything. And that when you guys have that as a foundation at home, then it makes it safe for you to make good and healthy decisions because you know where your parents lie in terms of their principles and their ideas about things, but you also know that you understand how to talk freely about the things that are on your mind. And I think that you guys do get a lot of information outside your home, but I think that it's really important to have a private and safe place, aside from your classroom, aside from a public place, aside from your peers, but someplace where when everything else fails, you know that you can talk honestly about how you feel and what you think and how things impact your life. And I think that starts at home. So I think the best place to get that education is in your home. And when you don't have that, at least to have another safe and, free environment. I have a home where sometimes my kids' friends come and talk to me when they feel like they can't talk to their parents. And I'll always direct kids back to their parents because I think that it's a very important thing to be able to have that trusting relationship. And when you have that, you're really blessed. If you don't, though, to have another safe and trusted, responsible adult that can give you good information.
I pass.
I think that teens are being sufficiently educated on sex, drugs, and pregnancy. They get it a lot in school because most of the time teenagers are not comfortable talking to their parents. Like I know my freshman year, I remember Miss Erin coming in talking from Planned Parenthood and Miss Athon class, I believe, and she educated us a lot on sex and drugs and all that stuff. And from personal experience, I wouldn't want to talk to my mother because you would never know what their reactions may be, and you don't want them to know about your personal life as much as they want to know. So you will never know until you try. Now I know that I can trust my mother and tell her anything, and I didn't think that her reaction would have been what it is.
Yeah, this is a huge question. In my professional life, Planned Parenthood has worked really, really closely with the Department of Education in Connecticut, and there are guidelines to be followed when talking to teenagers about sexuality and drugs and education. And as a parent, I really, really hope and wish that I have a relationship with my kids, that they're able to talk to me. If they're not able to talk to me, I kind of go with what Natalie was saying and hope that they find another trusted adult that they feel safe to get the right information. So we're really invested in making sure that young people have the facts and that they feel comfortable talking to their parents and family to figure out the values piece. What are their thoughts and beliefs? That's not my job to teach them values. It's their parents and their family's job to teach them that stuff. I want to make sure they have the facts about how their bodies work and where babies come from and that kind of information. And if they don't have an adult that they can talk to, that they know they can talk to me in confidence unless they're in danger or trouble, and then it's my job to report it and get them help. So we're kind of in this middle role if somebody doesn't have a parent to talk to, that they can ask us questions, but we're always referring them back to their family because that's the place where hopefully they're the safest.
The next question is very related. What do you think is the role of a parent or a family member in an adolescent's life? What is their main job, specifically for Ed and Natalie? Maybe you already mentioned this, but maybe you can be a little bit more specific about what you did to foster that more open communication with your children.
Yeah, wow, what's my job? That's a good one. Ideally, I hope my job is to guide my child in the direction that produces a content life on their behalf and a productive life as well. But ultimately, my goal my job is to guide them in the decision-making process, to show them, okay, these are my experiences. These are the things that are out there. These are the things that you're going to have to deal with and make decisions on. If you come home and say, gee, Dad, I got drunk, took the car, had sex in the back seat, and now I'm pregnant, you're going to have a reaction. So don't expect that that's not going to happen. But coming forward and just, taking your responsibility, take the leap, and just come out and just tell us what's going on. And not only is that's going to give your parent more trust that they can talk to you on a more personal level, and it's also going to give you guys confidence about coming to your parents, telling us the hard things, the things that you don't want to tell us. We want to know no matter what, but it's a lot better. I think Natalie would agree with me. It's a lot better to find out from you guys than from the neighbor or from a teacher or from a friend or from Facebook or something like that. Those are usually not the good ways that we like to hear information. And when you give us the bad news, you're doing your part in fostering that relationship between the parent and the child, and then we can do our job and guide you in those lifelong decisions.
I guess I have to echo everything that Ed said. Like I said, I'm a mother, but I'm also a social worker. So unfortunately, I realized that not everybody's home is exactly the same. But for the most part, as parents, we love our children beyond anything that you can ever say, think, or do. You can't even imagine. And so, as a parent, my first job is always to protect my children. I also realize now that I have an adult child that even when they're over 18, that doesn't go away, that it's just your instinct. Parenting is an awesome responsibility. And, that from the time you're born, we want to keep you safe. That being said, as you get older, that role changes, and we understand that every year we let go a little bit more and a little bit more. And it's hard because we still hold a great deal of responsibility when you guys almost think you're adults, but you're not quite there. We're still financially responsible for you. We're still socially responsible for you. There's a lot. It's hard. It's what you don't realize. It's actually harder for us than it is for you, understanding.
Please head to their session 3 speaker location. Thank you.
Understanding that role. So I guess to get you guys to realize that beyond everything that you think, my job has always been, at least, and not to embarrass Jada, but to create opportunities for her to feel comfortable to talk. To let her watch that show that's like rated R and then kind of hear her reaction and say, well, what do you think about that? What would you do if you were in that situation? How does that make you feel? Have you ever been in that situation? How do you want to respond? And be calm enough to, if she says something that maybe I'm not comfortable with, explaining to her why I disagree, but also explaining to her how proud I am when she can just voice her opinion and her thoughts. And that's how I've made it work in my house, and I feel like we have a good relationship and we do talk, and she does share things with me, and she makes good decisions. And to let her know that I trust her, and that because she thinks that trust is valuable, she respects it, and it's meaningful to her. When you feel like it's important that your parents trust you and it's a meaningful thing to you, you don't let other people violate that. So you don't want to lie because you don't want to jeopardize that. You don't want to sneak around because you don't want to jeopardize that. So that's how I've made it work. And I think that if you guys really give yourself the opportunity to trust your parents enough to be honest with them and open those lines of communication, you'll be surprised, I think, like they said it, how your parents react, because no matter what, we love you.
But if they instill good good morals and values will follow that and will make great decisions.
I feel a parent's role on adolescence is their protector. All my life, I had both my parents, luckily, in my house to protect me and tell me what the right thing is to do. And I feel like their main job is to guide you down the right path. And I'm glad and grateful that my parents were able to do that for me.
They've stolen all my answers. Yeah, I think of age. I think of little kids and being more the protector, and then as people grow and become adults and are young adults, that it's to guide them and teach them and let them go try something on their own, and then pick them up when they mess up, and still give them a hug, and then help them try it again, and hopefully they do better each time they try it until they're ready to be on their own. And then to sort of echo what Natalie was saying is also to feel like I also need to speak for the young people that don't have parents or have that relationship with an adult, and again helping them find that person that they can talk to. Maybe it's an aunt or a cousin or a grandparent or a social worker or a teacher, and just acknowledge that not everybody has that, but there are adults out there that can have that relationship with them, even if it's not their biological mom or dad.
Thank you. Work in the reverse order now, if you don't mind switching it up a little bit. So halfway through. So next question is, if you encountered a teenager dealing with a health issue who may feel scared to tell their parent or guardian or family member, what advice would you give that teenager?
I deal with this every day. And I'm going to say your name wrong. Naisha said it really, really well, is that somebody might need to talk to me first, to sort of try out what they're going to say. Sometimes I role play and pretend to maybe be the teenager and have them pretend to be their parent and sort of play out their worst fear. And then I talk about what I see every day. I've been doing this work for about 10 years. And I'll say, 95% of the time, mom or dad might have a scared reaction, kind of like what Ed was saying. And then they need a second to breathe because they just heard the information for the first time. And then you can sit down and talk, and they're going to really appreciate you reaching out to them. So I kind of feel like I'm kind of maybe sometimes this middle person to help them figure out what they're going to say. And then I'm always encouraging them to find that adult. And 95% of the time it's their parent to talk to. So I cannot replace that relationship with a parent.
Can you repeat the question?
Sure. If you encountered a teenager dealing with a health issue who may feel nervous about telling a guardian, what advice would you give?
Me being a teen, like if one of my friends was to come to me and ask me what should they do, I would give them advice first, and then I would tell them to either go to a health care provider or their parents, because I can't tell another teenager what to do when I'm trying to figure out my own life on my own. So I would tell them to go to someone who is more educated.
As Naisha said, I would do the same, because really what they're dealing with, you can't tell somebody what's going on with their body because you barely know what's going on with your own. So you really can't give advice on that. You can give advice on what they should do, but then you also have to get them to report to somebody higher in experience.
You really have to go to your parents. And I advise kids, no matter what, you got to go to your parents. And if for whatever reason, if your parents aren't a safe place, then guide you to another trusted adult. But there's a reason why teenagers are teenagers, because you require the guidance of someone who's a responsible adult to help you through the hard stuff, especially health issues.
Yeah, I have to agree with Natalie. That's pretty much it in a nutshell. You really need to come to parents and tell them what's going on and let them help you with those decisions. I think as a parent, I find that sometimes it's actually a little more comforting and a little easier to answer some of the bigger questions. It's the little stuff that drives me insane as a rule. But when you come to us and you say, gee, I made this mistake, or I did this, I need you now. Nothing's going to make me feel any better as a parent that you guys have come up and opened up to ask us these questions. You know, like I said before in one of the other questions, you know, depending on the size of the mistake, you are going to get a reaction. You know, I mean, anything from a complete pause to, oh my God, what were you thinking? But, you know, if you did these things, if you went out and took the car and got drunk and what have you, well, guess what? Now it's time to face that responsibility and that fear of coming forward and getting over that fear and just getting it out. That's like the best building, that's the best ladder rung you guys are ever going to climb. I mean, I remember being, you know, 16 years old and trying to tell my father I crashed the truck. You know, but when it was done, when it was out there, hey, what's it going to do? It's going to kill me? No. You know, we're going to fix the truck somehow. I'm going to get yelled at and punished, but I did it. It was me. And that really, from that moment on, even though I got yelled at and punished, I mean, I felt like I could go to my parents and tell them, you know, the big deals.
Right. So the next question is, what is your stance on confidential health care for teenagers? Are you in support or opposition? What are the benefits? What are the cons? And Erin, maybe you can just briefly touch upon what confidential health care is.
Yeah. So yes, I work for an agency that provides confidential health care for teenagers, so probably pretty obviously I'm in support of it. And that answer is not simple enough. It's a really, really complex issue. So at Planned Parenthood, and I can speak on that, there's a law put out by the federal government. It's called Title 10, and it allows access for minors to receive reproductive health care from a family planning clinic. So we're not talking about like going to the doctor for a flu or a broken leg or anything like that. But if somebody needed a pregnancy test or an STD test, a teenager is able to access those services, and it's confidential. With that said, it's going to be a longer visit, a more complicated visit potentially than somebody who's over 18, because part of the counseling that that teenager receives from someone like me is around who can they talk to about this issue. It's great you came in, I'm going to give you the facts, we're going to get you what you need, and when you leave our doors, who's going to support you in the rest of your life? What would it be like to talk to a parent or guardian? What would it be like to involve another adult, reach out to a teacher? And again, the statistic is about 85 to 90% of teenagers that access confidential services have a parent or guardian that knows. And again, the older the teen, the more likely they're doing it on their own. The younger the teen, the more likely they are in crisis. If I see a 14-year-old who's coming in for a pregnancy test, 98% of the time her parents brought her in and something really big is going on. And so that families come together and said, I need to get more help. So I'm in support of it. I've also worked with young people who had no one else in their lives, and they told me what was going on, and we were able to reach out to, somebody to get them help, a social worker, a teacher, somebody to get them out of their hard situation and provide support. I've also taken phone calls from families that have been really upset that their young person came and got services. So I definitely see all sides, and overall I support confidential health care for minors, and I want young people to have an adult they can talk to.
My stance on confidential health care is kind of 50-50 on for and against. The reason why it's for is because teens or just anybody needs more support outside of their family, and I'm against it because if parents know that teens are going to confidential health care, they might feel that their communication level and just their relationship with their child is decreasing, like they're losing that relationship that they had before. So I feel like it's good and bad to have confidential health care.
I would also say I'm on both sides because on the upside, the children get what they need, the help they need. They get somebody to talk to if they can't go to their guardian. I'm also against because something really bigger than you and the healthcare people can be happening to you, and your parents should have the right to know about it. I feel like because if they know you're going to that, they're gonna automatically question, why didn't you come to me? Why don't you feel like you can? And more so, like, they should know what's going on with you. Although you don't want to tell them, eventually they're gonna know. Somebody's going to tell them. It always gets back.
So I'm going to maybe be the only dissenting voice, but I am not in support of confidential health care for minors. Mostly personally, because I have an opinion and a view about the role of a parent in their children's lives, and I think that it really kind of helps to foster an environment where we're not talking. If I can access services without having to go through my parents, then I'm going to do that versus going through my parents. And I've seen it used more as a tool of defiance than as an aid. So I take that position very strongly. Secondly, sort of professionally, because I know that regardless of what's going on in your life as a teenager and whether or not you get immediate access to care or services, you always need that psychosocial component, which means no matter what happens when you go through crisis, any counselor will ask you what supports are in your life and who is going to help you through this the longer term. So believe it or not, no matter what you think, you're never alone in a situation. And I guess that's my biggest fear for most teenagers. When you decide that I'm grown and I can do it on my own and I don't need anybody, and you have all the services that you think you need to do whatever you want to do, you forget that you are never alone. Nobody's an island, and we really always need the support of the people who love us to help us have healthy, meaningful lives. It's just part of who we are as human beings.
Yeah, I'm going to back Natalie up 100%. I'm not sure what else I can add to that. At your stage in your life, I think we've already established that there are decisions that you should not be making alone. And if you do that, if you have that ability to make those decisions outside of that relationship between yourselves and your parents, well, then sometimes, like Natalie said, it's just as easy to say, wow, gee, I don't have to tell Mom about this. Well, anything, even the smallest decisions, as those decisions get larger and you make them without your parents' involvement, you're driving a wedge between yourself and your parents. So no longer does your parent have the ability to help you make the decisions that they need to, because you've excluded them from a major part of your life. And once you do that, you're already going down a life of your own where your parents are not going to be able to be there and help you out, because at some point in time, there's always going to be that distance. You've drawn a line, say, gee, I could talk to them about this or that, but this really giant decision, I'm going to leave them out of it. And as far as the availability of confidential health care, I think access to health care is a tool, but I don't think I want a health care provider doing the job. That's basically where I would fall.
Thank you. We're going to move ahead here, and I'd like to ask, do you think that an interactive application, online app, would give giving advice to teenagers and parents about drugs, alcohol, sexually transmitted infections, and pregnancy as an effective means of alleviating teenage health problems?
I think could be a useful tool in the big, huge toolbox of everything. I don't think it's going to be at all an end-all, be-all to alleviate the issues that we've talked about that young people are facing. I know we have access to lots of really awesome websites. There's an organization called Sex Etc., which is out of Rutgers University, and they have a space where young people get their questions answered in real time. It's awesome. They also have a page for parents about how to talk to their young people about sex and sexuality. That's stuff that we provide at Planned Parenthood. I do a lot of workshops for parents to help them increase communication with their young people. And like I said before, learn the facts so they can weave in the values that are important to their family. So I think all of those are really important tools. I wonder more about effective. If it's the only thing out there, no, it's not going to be enough. And I think it's really important to have a place where people can go and get the facts, get the right information about biology, about sexual health, about resources if they're in a hard relationship. And so I think it's just another tool in the big toolbox of everything out there.
I'm passing for now.
What doesn't alleviate mean? Oh, a question. Alleviate to get rid of some of that pressure to help with it, to support it. Yeah.
I think that an interactive app can help alleviate some of the issues, but not completely, because there's still, even though you have the app, you still have to effectively talk to face to a person. I feel like that has more of an impression than talking to somebody through a device, because I mean, like, when you're face to face, you have more of a connection to the person and what they're saying. You can absorb it better than through an app, because it's just like reading words off a paper. It's like, okay, why do I need this? What is it going to do for me?
Naisha stole my answer. I mean, an app is great, but as we've been talking, I know you guys all know that this is a bigger issue, and it's much more complex. And some of the things that you guys face around sexuality and drugs and everything goes towards healthy self-esteem and imaging and background and environment, etc. And a lot of that is about interpersonal communication. It's about sitting and talking with someone that knows you beyond just a question, because a question's usually more than just a question. And so I think that you can't take the personal out of that.
Yeah, I like that. Wow, maybe I'll split the middle here. Because just being a techie, I would love it if I could just pop on my phone and just be like, hey, listen, I got this pain in my side, what do you think? Because going to the doctors isn't one of my favorite things to do anyway. But that said, that really doesn't address the whole interactivity of it. I'm not sure that a teenager, again, if a teenager has a place to go where they could talk to a doctor without me knowing about it, well, then I'm kind of putting my faith in a doctor that I don't know. Plus, you never know who's gathering information on you. If you start asking questions and you're talking to, so you don't know who's on the other end of the phone, basically. So I'm not sure about the level of interactiveness, but any warehouse where you can go and get information, the easier the better. That's where I'd come from. I mean, I'd love if I had something like that I could, like I said, just double tap and be there.
Great. Well, thank you so much for answering those questions. I just want to say a couple of thoughts based on your answers. It seems to me that there's an array of issues that teenagers are facing, from societal pressures, decision-making issues, general stress at school, friend pressure, peer pressure, trying to stay focused, and learning how to communicate with parents and other adult figures. We also talked about that a lot of the responsibility about health education falls on the school, but Ed and Natalie mentioned that a parent can be the first teacher in your lives. And Najee and Nyasia mentioned that there are multiple people that you can go to. There are other teachers. There are teachers here and other adults. And Erin kind of wrapped it up by saying that, that she is a resource, and there are legitimate resources out there for you to speak to in person. Najee, you were saying that talking in person is a great way to start talking about your health. But it's also great that there are other options. I think the more options, the better, and an application is one way to do that. They're legitimate and they're also inaccurate, but I guess the more that we look at, the more options that we have, the more information we can obtain. So, with that being said, we can open it up to Q&A, and you're all welcome to, raise your hand. Please say your name and let us know your question. We would love to hear from you.
And if I could just add one thing too, as far as like relevancy to our class. Right, so our whole thing is this is an app, correct? So what can we take away? Also, if you want to raise your hand and you don't have a question, but you'd like to talk about what you're taking away from what we just heard today, maybe it's that we need more information for parents. Maybe it's, I don't know. I don't want to put words in your mouth, but also, and then think about the theme of our expo. So how does this help us think about our theme? And I would really like somebody to tell me about that too. So if you have questions, and then also if you have some thoughts on that too. And you just need to speak up, probably.
My name is Leslie, and our theme is should we, wait, what is it? Should we? Like Natalie says, from the parents' point of view, they think we shouldn't. Well, we should, but we shouldn't in some way because teenagers should go to their parents instead of going to an app or instead of going to somebody or talking to somebody who doesn't even know them. But then, from some teenagers' point of view, we should because they don't all have a parent they could trust or adult they could go to. So we're like in the middle of should we or could.
Don't be shy.
How would you guys feel if one of your children use this app?
Could you repeat that? What's your name? Sorry. I couldn't hear you.
My name's Kiela, and how would you guys feel if your child used this app?
If the child used the app, how would we feel? Well, I did say I kind of like the app idea, so I guess I'd have to stay consistent on that. But at the same time, you know, without that interactivity, as long as that aspect of the app wasn't there, or you know, there was some sort of restriction on that, the more information, the better. And I have no problem with you know, my child using this app to gain information, you know, much like you would WebMD or something like something else like that. And you know, just the fact that it's on your phone or on your iPod or whatever brings it to you in an easier. No, it's easier to get to, and easy information is good. But I would hope that you know, anything you know, out of the normal, you know, my child would come to me on, and I would want to make sure that they did that. How do I make them do that? Well, that's probably another conversation.
I have a suggestion. Me being involved in this app, I feel like what we should include is a section for parents so that parents will know about this app and they will be aware that their children are using this app. But I feel like we should have a part where you give advice to them also, because parents sometimes don't have all the answers and they need help too sometimes. So I feel like we should give a part where we tell them how to deal with the certain things that teen are going to, if they tell them what they're going through, I feel like we should tell them how they should well, not how they should react, but how they can deal with the certain things that their children are going through.
And along those lines, I would suggest too that part of however that question is answered is make sure that the conversation's not done. Reach out to somebody like your parent or guardian that you can talk to, so it doesn't just make the young person feel like, oh, I got my answer, everything's fine, I'm moving on. That they know that it's an ongoing conversation.
Oh, wait, what's that?
Oh, okay.
Get to.
Hi, Jane Dawn from the Center for 21st Century Skills at Education Connection. And one of the things that I think maybe it has come up, and I'm sorry that I was late, but I think an app can be a place of information, not advice, but information. And as I'm a parent, but I also for 20 years worked in obstetrics and gynecology, and especially I realize how many things parents don't know. They don't know about the latest drugs. They don't know about the latest STDs that are going around. And I mean, certainly I had personal, information about this when I was working in gyno. So I think that just the fact that the app would be there for information for the parents, as you said, they're not up to date with everything that's happening. And sometimes, and I was in the sort of the beginning of this, something becomes an